Good morning, everyone. I'm going to start off with a little audience participation here, just so I get to know kind of what you are, since this is my first time speaking here. How many of you are involved in the day-to-day cybersecurity of your particular plants or your business? Okay. How many of you are involved with policies and procedures for your organization? Well, a good amount there. How many of you never raise your hands for audience participation questions? All right. So my name is Klint Walker. I am with the Department of Homeland Security. I am not Jeff Gray. Jeff could not be here today. Jeff is with our Industrial Control Systems, our ICS CERT. He has all the specialized knowledge that you guys would really love to hear today. Instead, you get me, and I have a more generalized knowledge on this particular area. So I have been with the federal government for probably close to 15 years now. I've been with the Department of Homeland Security for 2. I took this job because I thought this job needed to be done, because I thought that it was a fantastic opportunity to reach out for the public and help with cybersecurity across all the different industries out there. This is our generic disclaimer here. You know that the government has to do this. You guys also get to hear me say this nice little phrase. My name is Klint Walker. I'm from the federal government, and I'm here to help. So the Cybersecurity Advisor Program is relatively new to the Department of Homeland Security. We're only about 3 years old. Raise your hand if any of you have ever heard of a cybersecurity advisor from DHS. A lot more of you than I thought. So when 9/11 happened back in 2001, the Department of Homeland Security was tasked with protecting the homeland. We were tasked with that great job of looking around and saying, what is our critical infrastructure and how can we protect it? How can we stop another, or at least limit the damage from another attack from occurring? And what really got us is that when we went out and we started looking at what we consider critical infrastructures, that we realized for the first time, I think, that 80% of critical infrastructure is not owned or operated by the federal government. It is actually owned and operated by the states, by private industry, and by others. And that really, so how does the federal government step in and protect something that they don't have any control over? One way, of course, is regulations, but even regulations, can only do so much. So what they did was they created what we call the Protected Security Advisor Program. And this is a group of liaisons. There's 144 protected security advisors across the country. And they go out and they partner with critical infrastructure, with state and local governments, and they're trying to help protect the infrastructure out there. They do guards, gates, and guns. And so they're saying, hey, for physical security, this is what you can do to help limit yourself. Everything from active shooter training all the way down to this is where you need to put your fences, this is how tall they need to be, this is where your physical security vulnerabilities are. This program was immensely popular. But a couple of years ago, a lot of critical infrastructure came to us and they said, hey, we got this guards, gates, guns thing down pretty good. What we're worried about is cybersecurity. We're worried about being the next attack, the next front page news story. And so they created us, the cybersecurity advisors. We're the other hand that comes out and looks at you, the ones that we're here to help you get to where you need to be. The problem is there's 144 physical security advisors. There's 10 cybersecurity advisors. So this is me down in the corner here. I cover 8 states: North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, and Kentucky. So they told me 20% travel when I took the job. They were not completely honest with me about that. So I stay on the road about 90% of the time. My job really is to step out. I am exactly what my job says. I am a security advisor. I am here to help you in any way, shape, or form that I can. Anything from just coming in to be another person to bounce ideas off of, to showing you all the different services that DHS can offer you, most of which come with no cost to you. I like to use the word free, but headquarters always yells at me about that. They like to say these are already paid for services. Your tax dollars have already paid for these, so if you're not using them, then you're just kind of wasting money. So you've already heard some great presentations up here, some really good remarks, and I don't really know that my slides are going to do anything other than what they've already shown you. The world has changed. I mean, I've been going out there, talking to a lot of industries out there, and the bad guys have gotten better, and they continue to get better. Every day they're finding new ways, new advanced tactics to come after us. They're taking things to a whole new level. We think about everything that's online today. That's an interconnected world. You know, we put ICS systems and, you know, SCADA systems that were designed to be self-contained networks, and we've automated them and put them online, put them in with the rest of our networks. We've got coffee makers that you can work from your phone. I've seen washers and dryers that will tell you when your laundry's done, you know, refrigerators that'll order milk for you when you're low. But at the cost of all this automation, all this, you know, stuff for us comes with the risk of what can be done against us. In today's market, it's the speed to, you know, market that can get you. The first one out there is going to make all the money. So do you think security is usually at the forefront of their minds when they're trying to put new product out? Not usually. You know, we go out and we talk to a lot of places and we say, hey, if you have 2 different security cameras that you can put on that are both internet connected, the $100 model, which has security built into it and does all these great things for you, or the $10 model, which is just a base off the shelf, no security built into it. Most people are going to take the $10 model every day of the week. All those doorbell cameras out there, all those home, you know, cameras and everything like that. I mean, people have found a way to compromise those, to use them to attack other people because there's no, you know, security behind them. That's the world that we live in, is that everything's automated, everything is a potential target. And that's what we're looking at, is the number of cyber attacks has grown exponentially each year. Everything out there, we got all new avenues of attack. You know, the attack surface is growing, and it keeps growing every day. I mean, if you'd have told me 20 years ago that I would have a computer in the palm of my hand that would store my entire life, everything from credit card numbers, banking information, most people cannot stand to be without their phone for 5 minutes. Imagine what bad guys know that they can do to that phone, or what they can take away from you. Would you be willing to pay to get your phone back if somebody hit it with ransomware? Because ransomware is out there for your phone. Ransomware is out there for your TV. How many of you have smart TVs that talk to Netflix for you? Did you know there's ransomware for those things? How would you like to be watching the big game or your favorite show and suddenly a pop-up comes up and says, hey, I own your TV, 20 bucks to get it back? And how are you going to ensure that, you know, you don't get hit the second time with that? You know, and that's what we're looking at is trends. The bad guys are teaming up. They've organized. Al Capone wishes he had the organization that these people do. They are sharing information. If one guy's good at perimeter breaching, he's going to look at how he's going to breach a perimeter and then sell that data to the next guy or give that data to the next guy. They're all working together, sharing data across the network. How many of you realize that a lot of the major malware people out there have a help desk? That you can call them and they will very politely walk you through how to get your files back and how to pay them money. Why? Good customer service. They want you to be a repeat customer. They're going to keep coming after you. And they're very good at it. They make you feel really good when you pay them that money. Give them the Bitcoin or Apple iTunes cards, whatever it is that you're trying to get to them. Do you realize that some of the major malware writers in the last couple of years have retired? They made so much money, there was so much profit in it that they retired. These are 25 and 30-year-old kids that are retiring because of malware, because of illegal activities. And that's what they're saying. Most people, when I go out and talk to energy companies, water companies, manufacturing plants, they're like, well, we're not a target. Who would come after us? Well, people who need money. That's, you know, the old adage is, why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is. Well, your processes, your data, that's the new money. They're going to come after you. They're going to look for you to get malware. They're going to try and do something to you so that they can make you pay them money. And that's what we're looking at. The sophistication we're talking about on this slide isn't the sophistication in the script that they're writing. It's the links that they're willing to go to in order to attack your networks. It's the sophistication of finding out exactly how you do business, exactly what your processes are. Most of the time, the bad guys know more about how you operate than you do because they've done their research. I used to do penetration testing, and it used to be what we call the first start of any good pen testing is reconnaissance. That's where I would go out and I would learn as much as I could about your company. It'd take me 2 weeks to really figure it out, but it was a lot of, you know, boots on the ground type of work. I was casing, you know, the joint. I was walking around. I was looking you up on the internet, trying to figure out who you did business with, what IP stuff did you have out there. With websites like Shodan or some of the things that are out there on the dark web, I can do all that in 15, 20 minutes now. I can create an entire attack profile against a company in 15 or 20 minutes. Things that used to take me 2 weeks, I can do in a matter of minutes now because of how everything's automated. All the web crawlers gathering information for me, putting everything out there right at my fingertips. That's what these guys are doing, and then they're sharing the information. The question that I ask to my audiences usually is, so they're sharing information, they're teaming up, why aren't we? How come we're not sharing information? I'm not telling you to share information with the federal government. It's nice if you do, but sharing information with each other, helping each other out. We talk about a resource gap. Well, if you got somebody that's really good at forensics and somebody else has a really good firewall guy, why aren't you guys leveraging each other's abilities and skills? Saying, hey, I'll let you borrow my forensics guys if I can borrow your firewall guy from time to time. Partner up with people in your same industry. Look for areas where you can help, mitigate that resource gap and get what you need to get done. This is kind of a heat map of ICS networks out there. This is provided by Shodan. So, you can just see the nice bright lights there. That's where all the industrial control systems are. I live mostly on the IT side, but I do a lot of OT stuff as well. Our services go out with the CSA program. We'll talk to anybody and do just about everything. The ICS CERT, which is our team that sits up in DC, they do a lot more work with the ICS community than I do. But it's really, when you look at this and you look at the risks and the vulnerabilities that you have and you start thinking about something, when I'm looking at an IT program, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be able to stay current on my technology. I'm going to be able to jump forward every couple of years. I'm going to be able to buy new technologies. I have to keep, constantly modifying the way that I do business in order to stay current. But on the ICS side of the house, you're normally looking at a 40-year, 25 to 40-year lifespan for your systems. So when I used to work for the Department of Defense, we always found it funny that we had a bunch of Windows 95 and 98 systems laying around that we had networked together. And when I first started there, I almost had a heart attack. And I was like, what are these systems for? Why do we even have these on the networks? And one of the guys looked at me and said, you realize that the F-16 was built back in the 1960s and 70s, right? That it doesn't interface with Windows 2000 or the Windows 10. We still need these old systems to interface with it. And ICS systems are no different. A lot of times you have to use older technologies. You have to have some things around because your systems are designed to operate them a lot longer. But that comes with a certain operational risk with it as well. So let's talk a little bit about people. They always say that people are the weakest link. I don't really like that adage. I like to think of people as being the strongest link because they're what you keep your business going forward. But people's knowledge or awareness of security, that's the weakest link. Everything has changed. The world as we know it is not like it was. When you start looking at things and you start saying, okay, the bad guys, the nation states that are out there, they're after our biggest, darkest secrets. They are coming after us to steal things for us. And as we saw with the Ukraine hacks and things like that, that's not necessarily true. They're looking for disruption. They're looking for ways to become part of our normal operations, to be able to take us down either piece by piece, brick by brick, or with a massive strike against our infrastructure. Kinetic warfare is still there. It's still the big, boy on the block and stuff, but cyber warfare is not far behind it. How many of you think that your industry might be targeted by a foreign entity if they thought the United States was a threat to them? Water companies, energy companies. When I go and talk to these places, that's what they're saying is, hey, we weren't a target. And I'm like, well, now you are. Because that's the new way of things. Once you automated, once you put things online, you became the new target. And you just didn't jump from like the bottom of the list and work your way slowly up. You went from being down here, nobody really looked at you, to being up here, target number one. They're coming after you. And that's what we're looking at. So whenever you start saying, hey, is somebody interested in what I do? Because security starts with personal security and then corporate security. When I would do pen testing, I would look for people that I thought might be able to give me access to systems, and I would social engineer those people to use so I could get their credentials, use their credentials to get throughout the network. Most security guys on most networks are looking for a bad login, or they're looking for unusual activity, from account lockouts and things like that. They're not looking for legitimate traffic from a legitimate, person. And if I can figure out what your Facebook password is, I bet you that somebody in your company is using their Facebook password as their corporate password. Yeah. And I can get your Facebook password pretty easy. I can get your LinkedIn password. I can network and social engineer across the board until I get something, and then I can try those passwords, because let me guess, I can probably figure out what your company uses for your username and login. That's what we're looking at here, is what are your policies? What is your awareness? How are you training people? What are they putting on their resumes? Organizational charts. We start looking at some of the new trends these days as business email compromise, where they're sending out emails that look like they're legitimately from your boss. And, people will jump on them. Are you people, do you know what your org charts are? Are you putting, so let me tell you a quick story, because I love stories. We had a company, and this company called us up and said, hey, we were talking to them about business email compromise. And their particular CEO had posted on his Facebook page that he was taking a vacation, a well-earned vacation, to his cabin in the woods up in Tennessee. And so not more than 2 days after that, everybody in their HR department got a nice little email saying, hey, having a great time up in the cabin, getting a little worried about tax season though. Can somebody please send me all the W-2s so I can work on them at the cabin and have them ready to go by the time I get back? Now there are 27 people in their HR department. 26 of them said, why would he use his personal email account to send us something about work, and step back? One person wanted to be the hero. One person wanted to get their boss to say, you did a great job, you saved me while I was out there at that cabin, and sent all 500 W-2s unencrypted over an email account to somebody. Within 2 weeks, 60% of that company had tax returns filed on their behalf. That company paid out over $10 million in damages to try and fix all of that. One person, one mistake, trying to do the hero thing, cost that company $10 million, almost put the company under. That's what we're looking at, is one mistake by one individual can seriously hurt you these days. Social engineering was always my specialty whenever I was doing pen testing. I was okay on the keyboard, I'm pretty good with the scripts and stuff like that, but talking is what I love to do. I used to always have a bet with the cyber guys to see which one of us could get in first. I once convinced a bank that I was there from their IT department. Not only did the security guys escort me back to their server room, they helped me unhook the servers, carry them out to my car, load them up, and I drove away with them. So that's what we're looking at today, is people want to be helpful. People want to be recognized. But people also don't have an awareness or understanding of what. Most people, when I talk to them, they don't understand what their role in the organization is, how important the data that they have, how important the processes they have are to the rest of the organization. We once gave a great talk to a bunch of people, and I saw this one woman sitting up in the front row, and she had her arms crossed, and she was just looking at me with this sneer on her face. And I said, ma'am, I was like, is everything okay? And she's like, I don't know why I'm here. This doesn't have anything to do with me. And I said, the data that you work with at your company isn't important, and you don't think that you're learning anything here? And she's like, I'm just in HR. None of the data, I just have people's payroll information. I mean, it's not like it's important, people are gonna come after that. I said, we need to have a talk afterwards, because I could use some of that data. So, I mean, that's what we're looking at, is people don't realize, because they work with it every day, how important they are to the bigger machine. So, these particular numbers here are going to be skewed because these are just the numbers that get reported to the Department of Homeland Security, which isn't much. I mean, when you're looking at that, Verizon report, their data breach report from last year said that there were over 100,000 security incidents, 2,500 confirmed data breaches, and only 290 of those were really reported to DHS. So we deal on a very small scale. Not everybody calls us and talks to us. Most people don't even know that you can call and talk to DHS. We have the NKIC, which is our communications line. It's for federal networks, but anybody can call, and I'll have the phone number and stuff up here for you by the end of the slideshow. Anybody can call the NKIC and tell them that they're having a problem. Anybody can ask us for help and say, hey, DHS, we could really use some help. We'll get the Secret Service, we'll get the FBI, we'll get our own people. We have an entire industrial control system CERT team that can come out and help you. We can try and talk you through things over the phone. We just want to make sure that you're okay. So, my first thing here is, please call us if you're having something or you think you're having something. But you look at how these numbers are growing every year as well. And this is what we're looking at is, across the sectors, 50% of the incidents that were reported to us jumped up to where they were coming from the water company. Water companies are being attacked. If that doesn't keep you up at night, I don't know what does. It's worrying about your drinking water. I mean, how many of you in your organization have a defined policy that says this is what an event is and this is what an incident is? Can you tell something, the difference between an event and an incident? I saw a couple hands go up. Most places I go into, they're like, well, isn't an event an incident? I said, well, me locking out my account on a workstation, that's an event. You're probably not going to devote resources to looking at that event. But if I locked my account out on every workstation on your network all at the same time, that's something you might want to look into. That's an incident. So being able to say, what is our baseline traffic? What is our baseline? What is our normal mode of operation? And then be able to detect when there's an anomaly, that's something that your company, that's gold to you. That is more than most people can do. Because the bad guys get into your networks, and they don't look any different than what you think your normal traffic looks like. If you haven't baselined properly, they want to be in. It used to be when I started in this industry, we called it the snatch and grab. People wanted to break into your networks, do as much damage as they could, steal what they could, and get out and hope that they got something valuable. Those days are gone. They want to get into your network, they want to become part of your network, and they want to slowly exfiltrate data out. Drops at a time so that they're never detected. They say, hey, why do I need to try and take all this risk to make $100,000 a day when I can make $1,000 a week? By slowly getting that data out, or being able to manipulate things, maybe not today, but when I need to manipulate them. So they're in the networks. And so you can see that advanced persistent threat is still our #1 out there. What bothers us really is that insider threat, we know that it's a bigger threat that's out there, and yet people don't report that. A lot of the times we're not aware of how many or don't have statistics on insider threat, and that is still probably the #1 thing out there. And I'd like to caveat that by saying that insider threat isn't always what you think about it. Insider threat can sometimes it's not malicious intent sometimes. Sometimes it's just incompetence. Sometimes it's just them not paying attention to your policies and processes. But somebody's mistake, whether it was intentional or unintentional, can still have the same consequences. I mean, that's what we look at like with the Target hack and stuff like that. There was an insider. Yes, it was still an external entity that did it, but it was an insider that helped them gain access. Sony was the same way. That's what we're looking at, is sometimes they are social engineering their way to get one person on the inside on their side, and that person's helping them do the rest of the things that they're trying to do. All right. So once again, this is what we're looking at, is total incidents in 2016, 2090. Across the world, you're looking at about 1,500 from that time period. Everything is kind of going up. Like I said, Jeff would probably have a lot more to say on that particular slide. I think you guys have already heard, Doug talked really good about the Petya and WannaCry malware. I'll just take the DHS approach here and say that we really strongly encourage you not to pay the ransom, especially on these particular two here. There's probably no way you're going to get your data back anyway because they're more wipers than they are really, ransomware. And I think there's going to be a talk later on today about, the cyber insurance, which can really help you out. So another quick story on this. The bad guys with ransomware, they're really targeting places that use industrial control systems or that have data that they can't live without right now. And that's just the way that it is, because you're going to be more likely to pay the ransom if you need to get back up and operational. How many people in this room know how to buy a Bitcoin? Okay. Now that it's up to $30,000, you know how to buy the Bitcoin, right? So there was a police department that got hit by ransomware, and they called me up and they said, hey, we're hit by ransomware. We took a look at it, got some DHS resources to get in there and help them, and unfortunately it was a 0 day, something we'd never seen before, so there wasn't a whole lot we could do with it. And so we started talking to them saying, hey, what is your backup strategy? And they said, well, we back up nightly. Every night at 11 o'clock we back up. And we said, well, that's industry best practice. That's fantastic. Do you have physical processes which go along with your automated process? They're like, no, we got rid of the pen and paper copies a long time ago. Everything's automated. It's all online. They got hit by Wednesday at like about 4 o'clock in the afternoon on this particular one. And it's like, okay, so you're probably going to lose today's data. We're going to restore from backup. You'll lose just what happens on Wednesdays. What happens on Wednesdays? What data are we looking at losing? And the sheriff looked at us and he shook his head and he said, all of our prisoner transfers happen on Wednesdays. All of our fines are paid on Wednesdays. All court cases are heard on Wednesdays. I was like, so what you're saying is the bad guy did his homework and figured out the day to hit you that it would hurt the most. And he said, yeah. And you only do nightly backups, so there's no way we're going to be able to recover this data. And he said, no. So where that might have been industry best practice backup strategy, it was not best practice for his particular operational environment. And he knows that now. So they were going to be down until we could restore them, but he made a business decision. He's like, we're going to have to pay the ransom. We cannot afford to lose this data. But they didn't know how to buy a Bitcoin. And we started walking them through the process to buy a Bitcoin. How many of you, if you went to your finance department right now and said, hey, we need to pay a ransom, let's buy a Bitcoin, they're going to look at you and be like, oh yeah, we're willing to give you $30,000 for that, and we don't know how to trace it, and we don't. So he went to their, financial officer for the county, and he's like, we need this, and they said, we don't have a process for that. So they were down 1 day because they got hit by the ransomware. They were down another 3 days because of a procedural thing on they didn't know how to buy a Bitcoin. That's the world that we live in. If you don't have an incident response strategy for what you think the threats to your industry are, you could actually be in more danger than you think. And you need to exercise that incident response strategy. So this is looking at some of the, like we do surveys just as well as everyone else. I think theirs are probably a little more in depth than ours are, but we're still looking at the trending across the boards here. And what we're still finding out is that boundary protections or segmenting of your network, we still see a lot of industrial control systems, a lot of manufacturing, which they want to tie their ICS systems directly to their corporate networks, but they're not segmenting them in any discernible way. They're not, everything's a flat network. If I get access to one, I have access to both. They're still using group accounts for a lot of their ICS stuff, not using individual accounts. There's a lot of another thing we see. They're not, doing a review on their log files. They wouldn't know their baseline traffic across their ICS if you paid them money to do it for them, and they're not really looking for authentication errors across their network. So that's really kind of what we're seeing from an ICS perspective. But that boundary protection, it's been number one every single year that we've looked into it. And that's probably your biggest threat there is, are you keeping your OT networks separated from your IT networks? Do you have logical and barriers in between there? Do you have policies and processes that support the way that you've segmented? Are you using VLANs where you need to? Are you making sure that only things that can talk to each other need to? I can tell you that when I used to do pen testing, I always thought it was a lot of fun whenever we would try and find the weirdest ways to get into networks. And I tell you, HVAC systems. I could get into somebody's HVAC system and jump to their corporate network. In these day and age, I can go through people's, badge access systems. Do you have a back door to your building that doesn't have a whole lot of visibility to it that I can remove the cover off that badge access system, plug in, and get to your corporate network? Nobody's watching that back door. I could sit out there all night. That's what we're seeing. How many people here can say with honesty that they think the firmware on their badge access system has been upgraded to the current levels? Most people are like, they make firmware upgrades to badge access systems? How about your camera systems? Are your camera systems running across the same wire as your corporate network? Probably. Or your VoIP systems. I mean, these are all ways which people can get into your networks, and most people don't even think about how they're segmenting, what those systems do. They're probably still using the default passwords. That's what we see most often when we go out and we start doing a lot of this stuff. So as you can see, 43% of the assessments that we were asked to do, so DHS, we're part of the Voluntary Program. You have to invite us to come out. We're not regulatory. We don't share information across the board to our regulatory side. If you invite us out, we'll come out and work with you. And 43% of the work that we've done over the last few years has been to wet water and wastewater systems. They have identified that there's a threat. They have identified the need, and they're reaching out to us. The energy sector has also picked up a lot this year. And believe it or not, now that election systems are considered critical infrastructure, election systems are reaching out to us as well. So this is the kind of the same thing that we just did on the other slide. What do we got going on here? The Internet of Things. Doesn't that scare you? That should be the title of a horror movie, right there, Internet of Things. So your Tackk Surface is growing. Like I said, I can get in through your HVAC system, your camera systems, for every little thing. If somebody brings in a coffee maker, we've seen, evidence, that bad guys can put, malware on, those little digital photo frames that people put on their desks, or the little thumb drives that wirelessly connect to your devices, wireless printers. Anything that you connect to your network can be a point for me to get in, or someone like me, so. I'm getting the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think I've overstayed my welcome. I'm going to put this slide up here because this is really the crux of what I do. This is the list, not even the complete list, but this is a list of services that DHS offers for anybody who would like to take part in our programs. We have remote and on-site systems. We do malware analysis. If you think you have malware, send it to us. We can analyze it and get you a report back on it. We heard a lot of talk earlier on about, hey, if you're targeted, it's completely different from your incident response program if you're targeted against it or if you're just collateral damage. Our malware analysis can help you determine, because we look at the threat actors involved with that analysis to tell you whether or not you may have been targeted or if you're just collateral damage from something in the wild. The big thing I like to point out here, though, is the cyber exercise program. How many of you actually exercise your incident response, business continuity, or disaster recovery plans? How many of those plans have a cyber component to them? DHS can help you if you do that. We can come out and facilitate tabletop exercises for you. We can help join you up with other people so you get a broader tabletop exercise with other peers in your industry or your county or your area. We can help you do all of that. We also can come in, our industrial control system CERT team, we do an on-site assessment of your ICS systems, what we call a design architecture review and a network architecture review. Although I just heard they changed the name on that to VADER, which is really cool if you ask me. I don't know what it stands for, something like vulnerability and architecture something, but it's VADER, come on. All right, so, and then from my side of the house, I can come on site and talk with you about your cybersecurity program. I do a cyber resiliency review, which looks at the maturity level, as we talked about here. How mature is your program? Where do your resource gaps exist? Where do your technology gaps exist? We do an infrastructure survey on you. What security controls you have in place? How can are those security controls actually protecting what you think they're supposed to be protecting? And then, of course, we do external vulnerability scanning on your system. And we also can do full scope pen testing for you as well. And like I said, none of these services have any charge to them. This is all DHS offering to help you. So some of these, like the pen test, what I call the Ferrari of our services, there's an 18-month waiting list for the pen test. So if you have any indication you want to do that service, get on our list now rather than later. Just jump through the last of these here. All right, so this is the ICS cert. If you need to get a hold of Jeff and his team, this is the phone number and the website that you can get to. Unfortunately, DHS does not allow us to share our slides. I should have mentioned that at the beginning so you could have taken more pictures. But you can always get a hold of Jeff or myself and we'll get you all of this information. All this information is also available right on our website, so you can just go right out there to that website and everything that I talked about today is out there. And then this is, like I said, this is our NKIC phone number. If you have a cyber incident or need cyber advice, just call the NKIC. They'll do everything they can to help you out, like I said. So the Coast Guard sits on their watch floor, so there's the FBI, the Secret Service, and other agencies out there as well, usually the fusion centers and the MSISAC. And then there's the website and the email address where you can send malware if you need to. They'll be very happy to analyze that for you and get your report back. It might take a couple weeks to get the report, but it's very well worth it. So thank you very much for allowing me to come out.